Hey man, how's it going?
It's going. It's not that I'm keeping track or anything. It's day 146 of quarantine.
I noticed you have little marks on the wall over there behind you.
Yeah. You got some things to keep saying. No, I dropped the ball in a previous episode. I remember if it was the last one or the one before that, where I had meant to look it up beforehand. In the meantime, I've since written a script that I use to just have it tell me. So, yeah, day 146. So
146
that's cool.
days. Wow,
Yeah,
that's a long time.
How are you doing?
Man, living the dream. So tonight's a special episode. We have a guest again, kind of a pretty regular guest, Mitch. Good to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be back.
And from his long, what were you going to say, John?
Well, I was going to ask, how many times has Mitch been on the podcast? No, I've lost track. It's been so many.
Is this 5 or 6, Mitch?
I want to say it's 6, but there was also the Lost episode, which might have technically made it 7, if I remember right, but I might be one ahead. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It would be either 6 or 7 for sure. And I think after one of those last ones, we're going to get back together and talk about some little Miami area things, and we just haven't pulled that off yet. But
yep.
And then back from his Siberian refuge where he was exiled after his last podcast visit, Chris, welcome back.
Back from purgatory, guys. Appreciate you having me back.
Podcast purgatory.
Are you back from purgatory, or is this purgatory?
I think how this goes will depend on whether I end up in a paradise or an eternal hell. So,
just so you know, the three of us have a betting line in Vegas on how this is going to turn out. So,
yeah. What are my odds?
They're bad, man. They're
What are my
bad.
odds?
They're bad,
swing
but
this one way or the other.
if you never see me show up to work again, Chris, you'll know that I hit big.
Absolutely. I think we've all bet so that we're gonna win big and move to paradise. And we're just gonna
and then we'll leave
out.
Chris at work by himself.
Absolutely. So we got together tonight to kind of talk about some things going on in the world, and we are beer driven, and so I started buying up some beer and sharing it with you all, and said, "Hey, don't drink this." I actually had a taste of it because one of you two, I don't know whose girlfriend it is, whether it's Chris's girlfriend or Mitch's girlfriend, but she reached across the table and grabbed Chris's beer and just opened it up. And if you could seen the painful look on Chris's face, like she had just destroyed a Rembrandt or something. It was priceless.
I was like, oh, that was a special podcast beer.
I mean, and she even went and got little ramekins so that we could social distance drink out of them safely and all that. So she was just completely had no clue that that's what's going on. So
I'll have to talk to her after this and make sure she knows how much that hurt Chris.
You do that. So what we're talking about is really a social justice initiative started by a brewery in San Antonio, and they came up with a Black is Beautiful beer, and so that's the beer we're all having tonight. I think everybody is having one from one of two breweries. One of them is a collaboration. And this effort was created by Weathered Souls down in San Antonio to bring awareness to the Black Lives Movement, and also, more importantly, to generate monies for local organizations in each community that decided to participate in this. And so there's lots of cool things going on with the different breweries. So is everybody open theirs?
I have,
Nope.
and refresh my memory, Mark, because once I knew these were podcast beers, I very intentionally did not do much in the way of research so that we could kind of talk about it on the episode. Because I assumed that, like most things beer, you're going to be like the all-knowing guru. So what's kind of the deal? I know that, there's a bunch of different breweries making this. Is it supposed to be like the same recipe that they all use? Is it kind of they all do their own take on it? What's sort of the game plan as far from that perspective?
Really good question, John. So Sierra Nevada really started this movement with a couple of years ago with the forest fires, and they have an IPA called Resilience. Mm-hmm. And in order to raise money for the families and businesses that were affected in Northern California, they shared their recipe with the goal of that being fundraising. And so Weathered Souls just really took a look at that, and that was really successful. And so they've shared their recipe for this particular stout beer, chocolate vanilla stout. I think it's got some lactose in it. Anything else am I missing?
Macadamia, coconut, and coffee.
Yeah. So a really complex sort of stout. Yeah. And so they've shared that recipe without any rights to it. And they've really had a ton of people show up and actually sign up to do it. So right now we're looking at over 1,000 breweries in the United States and some 20 countries. Something going on in most of the states. I dropped a link in the show notes for the stuff around us. So let's start with Kentucky. We're having the Mirror Twin Ethereal collaboration. So those two breweries went together, and they have a specific cause that they have been donating the money to. And so we grabbed that. Chris and I were able to meet over there, and we grabbed that beer a few weeks ago. Also in Kentucky, Mile Wide is going to have a version. Monic, the old Louisville brewery, Pivot over in Lexington, Chris, and I still haven't seen anything pop out about availability there. I assume you haven't?
Haven't heard anything from Pivot.
So, and then Gasper Brewing down in Bowling Green, which I have never visited. I visited all of these others at some time pre-COVID, which seems like 100 years ago. But, and then in Ohio, interestingly, bigger state for craft beer. Hopefully that continues to be the case. Lots of financial stuff going on with this healthcare crisis and the impact to small business. But the one we have from there is Street Side. I see Chris has the Street Side one in his hands, and looks like that's what John's got in front of him.
Yep. So I've actually done. I went ahead and opened both. Because another part of the reason why I asked you the question that I did was I wanted to sort of compare the two. Both very good, but I don't know if anyone else is doing the same thing that I just did, but very different flavor between the two.
And that was my experience with the Sierra Nevada Resilience, and that's why I want to continue to get these for us. Mm-hmm. So as they become available in places, I'll grab them and we'll share them and kind of continue to both contribute, be part of the discussion, and support those breweries. But the Resilience, while it was the same recipe, they were different. And we all know that probably my favorite brewery, and I'm going to guess Chris, is West 6. And the Country Boy version of that Resilience with the same recipe was different and better than the West 6 version. And so my expectation was that would be the case here. Street Side really does some interesting stuff, and so it doesn't surprise me that theirs is a little different.
Yeah, I kind of I think I had the West 6 version of Resilience one time. I probably drank an entire keg of the Country Boy one, given that I lived right next to Country Boy at the time, and I really liked Resilience, and the fact that it went to a good cause just, basically was all I needed for an excuse to go drink more. Not that I ever really need an excuse, but yeah, I mean, comparing these two, I think they're both really good. I find the Mirror Twin Ethereal collaboration is really... it's a bit more on the mellow side. Nothing's really jumping out at me as far as like distinctions. On the Street Side one, I'm really picking up the macadamia nut from it, and just like some hints of the coffee that I'm really not getting in the Ethereal Mirror Twin one. So I think it's really interesting to kind of compare those two, and it'll be interesting going forward to try others and see kind of how they shake out too.
What are you seeing, Chris? What do you see as the differences?
Really nutty. Like it's almost, it doesn't taste like peanut butter at all, but you can tell like lots of nut oil. I mean, coming through this thing.
You just smell the Street Side one, and I mean, it smells like toasted macadamia nuts. Like just that's a very, very prominent flavor.
It hits my tongue differently. Like, it's a tingle. I mean, there's almost like a acidic, or like the booziness is tingling my tongue. It's weird, but it's great. I mean, it's a great beer.
Yeah. No, I actually, I don't think I would have noticed
John,
that.
I opened both of mine and tried both side by side, I'd probably be on the floor. 10%. That's a boozy stout.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
It is, but you have to remember, Chris, I ate both of those gigantic Mexican street hot dogs for lunch like just 3 hours ago. So
okay.
I'm as well prepared as I'm going to be, and I really wanted the side-by-side comparison. So
I think John can do the whole 4 or 6 pack and be okay. Yeah. That was a massive meal. Mitch, what are you thinking about the beer?
I wholeheartedly agree with everything they've said so far. And I definitely prefer the Street Side over the other one. It's got that roasted is really the right word. It's not just a macadamia nut flavor. It is roasted macadamia. And you catch that first with the smell, and then it follows it up. Just solid flavor profile. I really like it.
I don't tend to go to either Ethereal or Mirror Twin for a stout. I can't say that I go to Streetwise for a stout either. Stouts and porters are kind of Listerman specific in the Cincinnati area for me, but Street Side does such a good job with taking a bunch of components and putting them together and making something really special out of it. So
I think you mainly go to Street Side for the worst, right?
No, that would be Mitch.
The beer that tastes like liquid sausage.
It's not a sausage flavored beer. It's a beer that doesn't taste like beer. It's just pureed Italian sausage.
It is. It's so weird.
Rough.
I would tell you
I'm not defending Ethereal in any way, but their Lambda oatmeal stout. If you're not,
it's good.
If you're not down with that, okay, all right. That's one of my faves.
I never got to Ethereal enough that other than a handful of beers, I would remember the names of what they were. They had a barley wine that I really liked there. I drank mostly like IPAs. A couple of their hazies I thought were really good, including the humorously named Fadtastic. That and purple ketchup at Country Boy kind of let you know what some of the brewers think of the hazy IPA popularity. But yeah, I can't remember the name of it. They had a barley wine that was really good. And if you remember on the chalkboard that lists the beers, it had like a demon, I want to say, standing there by the name, but I can't recall what the name was. But yeah, so to Chris's point, yeah, they I would agree, but I also would say, I agree with Mark's point about like I wouldn't normally go there for stouts, but I generally don't go anywhere specifically for stouts. It's just not the beer I'm usually gunning for. I'll go there and like try one maybe, but I'm not going to be like, I'm going to sit down and have like 3 or 4 stouts while I hang out here for a few hours. That's just not usually what I do.
Sure. And I think that's characteristic of stouts in general.
Yep, that's not my style either. But one place that I would go, 2 places go for stouts. Mark already mentioned one of them, Listerman. They do some incredible stouts. They got really good hazy IPAs with Fiona Hippo beers, or like line of beers that they do.
Yep.
They've got a few others that are really good. But I've been to a few beer tastings where it's pre-COVID, but everyone just brings beers, and throughout the year we would do different flavors, or different types of beer, different styles. And over the winter, it's usually, you bring out your winter warmers, or your stouts, or your generally darker beers. And I don't think I've done one in the winter where a Listerman beer hasn't won.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and they're really good with their porters as well.
Yep.
And
yeah,
so, go ahead.
I was just going to say another brewery in Cincinnati that does good dark beers, it's kind of their wheelhouse, is Bad Tom Smith's. They're not too far down the road from me. I've got a membership there, and they do a lot of dark beers, and they do them really well. They're real light on IPAs or anything like that, and to be fair, their IPA offerings aren't the best, but their dark beers are where they really shine.
So we may put you in charge, Mitch, of grabbing us some Bad Tom Smith Black is Beautiful. So they're on the list. So I was going to just cover a couple of either places I know some of us like, or we hang out. So Bad Tom Smith is on the list that they're going to do one. Brewdog is going to do one.
Oh,
I saw today that Rheingeist has released theirs.
Oh, is it released? Okay, because I've been watching for that. So Rheingeist is on the list. Sam Adams Taproom Cincinnati is on the list. Streetside, we've got Northern Row Brewery and Distillery. I'm not familiar with them, Mitch, or do you know? They're in Cincinnati. Have you heard of them?
I'm not familiar with Northern Row either.
So
they must be a little smaller.
Sounds like something we should look into. And then
For sure.
I would sure like to get my hands on one from Great Lakes. So they're going to do one, and Great Lakes just does really impressive beer across most of their styles. So hopefully they distribute that further than just out of the brewery.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be good to get down this way. Another brewery from further up north. Do you know? I know you're a big fan, Mark. Do you know if Platform is releasing one or not?
They're not on the list.
No. Okay.
And actually, we mostly talk about craft beer, Mitch, and and I saw the grin on your face. So since they've been acquired, I'm gonna say no. We're not going to talk about Platform. Yeah. Although I would say that prior to them selling out, which if I owned a brewery and had the opportunity to do something, I might sell out myself. So I don't harbor any ill will. I just would rather support the people that are not part of Big Beer.
Understandable. It's all good. Just had to give you a hard time there for a minute.
Nope. I appreciate that. So
it's
I think there's some.
It's weird to hear him say that though, because Mitch, you remember he used to have like all that Budweiser swag in his office, and he even had that light up sign for Fat Tire that he didn't put up until after they sold out.
Yeah, that's true. He had like a couple Budweiser posters. He had his favorite pint glass and art. He had on it. He kept on or in his desk.
Just so you all know, my attorney deposed Kyle across the street, and so we have a legal record of who defaced my office with that butt wiper stuff, and I'm still a little ambivalent on the New Belgium stuff. I'm still studying that one because it's Australian big beer as opposed to U.S. big beer, but. To my point, I'd still rather support these local people that contribute to the community. And the cool thing about this Black is Beautiful beer is all of these folks are giving back to charities and organizations in each of their communities. So local money stays local, and it impacts the Black Lives Matter initiatives and social justice activities and really critical. And I know we all wanted to talk a little bit about this tonight, and nothing's more ironic than four white dudes who've lived a life of privilege talking about social justice and Black Lives Matter. But speaking for myself, not to put words in anybody else's mouth, but I think it's people like us that have to finally speak out and talk about why everybody should be equal and why we should support this initiatives like Black is Beautiful beer campaign and Black Lives Matter, and the world would be a much better place with that equality and people treating people like human beings that matter. So I'll get off my soapbox. Somebody want to jump in?
No, I 100% agree. And I mean, I know you and I, it's slightly unfair for me to cherry pick conversations we've had before, knowing that, we're on the same page. But I know you and I, Mark, have had conversations before, especially like with respect to the elections that we had locally. It feels like, I'm not sure if it was yesterday or like 3 months ago, because the days all blend together, but that we both kind of agree that there's been plenty of people who look like you and I involved in politics, and we need to start to expand that and broaden that. And we definitely don't need like another white dude trying to represent people, because that has clearly not worked very well for a long time. Chris's political ambitions notwithstanding.
Thank you for that, John. Glowing endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. Forsyth 2024. But and I know recently, we were all kind of behind the Booker campaign. Definitely seemed like the most promising candidate, and was extremely unfortunate he did not get the nomination in a very close race. But yeah, we definitely need more people like that to kind of be at the forefront and be able to share their experiences. If we don't want things to just continue to be the same over and over and over.
It won't be the last time I cast a vote for Booker.
I don't think it will, Chris. I think we'll have some options there, and yep. I'm hopeful that we'll have some options. And Chris, along those lines, I mean, polling data today is that McConnell is absolutely shellacking McGrath with just a couple of months really left before the general election.
Surprised. And I wonder if that would change if he wasn't the majority leader. If the Democrats take the Senate and he no longer had all of this power, would he still be Kentucky's first choice?
I think that he's got so much political action money and big business money that it's hard for us to sit here and figure that out. But it seems to me that Charles Booker, when there were comparisons in the primary, that he was polling way more favorably during the primary, many months away from the general election, as a far more credible candidate than Amy McGrath. I'm a fan of we're talking about social justice, and I'll probably veer off the path a little bit here and there, but I also have a belief that that we should elect more women, and there should be more women in CEO and C-level jobs. I also think that that the lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer organizations, that those people should have also a better seat at the table. Don't want to take anything away from the Black Lives Matter, other than I think to say we need people other than what the four of us look like in order to do that. I saw something kind of heartbreaking the other day, and I didn't grab the source, but it was a discussion, and really the discussion was, oh, that person of color has these deficiencies, these shortcomings, these whatever, and finally somebody came along and said, so we've been electing mediocre white men for decades. Why suddenly does a person of color have to be perfect in order to be electable? And that's really the case. You know, nobody's going to be perfect, and people are human beings, and people are going to fail themselves. They're going to fail us, but everybody should have the opportunity to contribute to society, to our government, to leadership roles in companies, and it shouldn't be based on. I use this because I am one, but old fat white guys. It should be really based on skills and opening the door for people that have had the door closed on them their whole lives.
Yeah, I think that's an extremely fair statement. I would say basically across the spectrum, be we talking about politics, the job market, anything like that. In so many scenarios, you know, merit is not what it's based on, and the standards are just completely different. Especially if you look at it right now, I mean, you have some of the most inept and corrupt human beings possible in leadership roles in government. And, you know, you got people literally digging through every tiny facet of somebody's history to find the tiniest little, you know, mistake they made one time. And suddenly it's like, well, that should just clobber their entire political aspirations, their entire career. Look at this mistake this person made. And I'm like, I made 7 mistakes today. Like, what? This is so dumb to blow some of these things out of proportion and act like some people need to be perfect because they look different, as opposed to, you know, people who we very publicly see making heinous mistakes every day. You know, I mean, every time I see an interview with a particular political figure, you can't say something that's not just.
Yeah, you know, it's those 5 words that he knows and reuses over and over, and so it's beautiful. So yeah, absolutely.
Tremendous. A lot of people.
Yeah. So John, we're going to wait till your internet revamps again. The senator is dancing because it wasn't he that thinks he screwed up the podcast. But we deal with this every episode with John and his fabulous internet provider, Spectrum, who we will throw under the bus repeatedly for as long as we do this podcast.
You know, I really wish.
I just want to chime in real fast, John. I'll let you say your piece in a minute. But as an avid listener, I know these issues, this isn't the first time you've had them. They're pretty well documented on the podcast. And I think had one of our other guests tonight, listened to more episodes, he'd be aware and not realize this is a one-off.
Well played, Mitch. Well played.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate that. And in all honesty, it would almost be better if like my connection fucked up in both directions, because it's always only the upload that dies. And so I can't tell, because like I see everybody's videos working great. If they say something, it all works great. And I'm just like, sweet, everything must be normal. And then Mark kind of like cuts me off, and I'm like, that was weird. And I look down, we're in Discord recording this, and my little like signal indicator is like bright red, and it's like, you're fucked, bro. And I'm like, oh, it happened again.
Listen, there's no guarantees that I'm not gonna like wind up syncing this podcast at some point tonight.
Oh, we're aware.
But I didn't go robot voice. I didn't go robot voice. I'm standing on that. I'm standing on that one thing.
No, it's okay. Like, I moonlight as I voice Megatron in like the Transformers properties. So I just want to practice that every once in a while. Just throw it out there, make sure I still got it. It's fine.
All right, so I have to say something about the topic we're on before John went robot.
Dial us back.
I went to a very small, affluent, private college in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham, Alabama has the Global Institute of Civil Rights. And you learn a lot. Like, you can't help it. You are immersed in it, right? But my little campus was not typical of Birmingham, Alabama. It was very affluent, very white, very few minorities. There were social groups on campus who there had never been an African American as a part of those social groups, right? I'm familiar with some of the discussions of what the first had to be in order to be part of the social group. Like, you weren't just going to take. That was the implication, was you weren't going to take just anybody. And I still can't believe that was part of the culture when I was in college. That's not what I thought it was. Not what I thought college would be.
And our listeners can't see us, so they don't know how old we are. And so you're clearly in your 40s, so that was a long time ago. And yet nothing's changed. I mean, how heartbreaking is that? Is that it's been our whole lives. John and Mitch are a little younger. Maybe haven't. I don't know. Maybe it's as big a deal to you all in terms of how long this is going on, but it just seems to me that Chris's story resonates directly with me. I dropped a link into the show notes, and this is a guy I've not met, and his name is Aaron Wade, and I came across him online. We both have interest in recumbent trikes, and I started following him. I reached out to him and told him what a cool dude I thought he was, enjoyed his post. And I'm perusing through my RSS feed the other day, and this post pops up, and it's called Privilege. So he's a white guy just like us, and I'm not going to tell his story. I think our listeners should click on the show notes and read his story, but I'll tell his story from my perspective. I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky. And Aaron talked about all the things he did and how he always got out of trouble. And those are things that I did as a young man. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that my buddies and I got pulled over, and the worst thing that happened that we just thought was awful was they dumped out all of our beer out of our cooler. Then they let us go home. They lectured us sometimes and didn't ask to look in the trunk, and they let us go home. And that's just happened over the course of my growing up in Frankfort, Kentucky. The other interesting thing about Frankfort is it's the capital city, and it has a predominantly black university, Kentucky State University. And while I am at the worst case getting my beer dumped out, and at best case being told to be good and go home, which we never did, young men and women coming in to study at Kentucky State University were afraid to leave campus because if they got caught by the city police, they were arrested for the things that I was told to go home for. They were harassed because of the color of their skin. I can't remember in my whole time growing up, well into my 20s, that I ever felt that Frankfurt embraced the university and that people at the university felt like they were part of the Frankfurt community. I'd go as far today as say, today, I still don't think most of the people at Kentucky State University that come there to study feel like they're part of the Frankfurt community and can move about throughout the community in a fair and safe way. I should go on to say that like several times a week, I played pickup basketball on the Kentucky State University campus in, I think it was Bell Gymnasium for, probably from the time that I had a friend that could drive. So I was probably 15 through my mid 20s. That was kind of my deal, as I played pickup basketball and always played on campus, was always treated with respect. And I was always in the large minority, and I never felt like any of the people I was playing ball with felt comfortable moving very far outside the parameters of campus. I think that's the case today, and that's why we're here. That's why the protests are so important, and that's why people like us need to add our voice to the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and it's just it's kind of ironic that while we were testing our setup before recording, and I mentioned working at a gas station when I was in my early teens, my first job, out in the middle of nowhere. And while the story I told was much more humorous about the kid coming in, his friends told him that his turn signal was out because he needed turn signal fluid just to plunk in. And it was a funny story. It was very interesting working there, being out in the middle of nowhere. It was southwestern Pennsylvania, about maybe an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half northeast of Pittsburgh was about the area. Like way out in the middle of nowhere, absolute middle of nowhere. Extremely monochromatic community. And many people, even in the, early 2000s, who were extremely openly racist there. Many people would come into the gas station. I mean, it's like the backwater, middle of nowhere gas station that people hang out at because there's nowhere else to go when you live in that kind of an area other than the gas station. And I mean, people would come in there and talk about, groups they're a part of that are, openly racist groups, meetings they have, that sort of thing. And it was just like common discussion. Happened all the time. And to this day, I am extremely grateful, I guess, that apparently I'm just wired differently than the people who were in that area, that I did not fall into that I didn't think the same way or believe the same things, and that being exposed to that when I was, early teenager, didn't kind of sway my opinion or anything like that. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I'm pretty happy, but definitely I mentioned this because, to your point, Mark, even being slightly younger than you are, definitely that sort of thing is still extremely prevalent. Lots of those people still around, and it's still a massive problem to this day.
And I just don't understand. I mean, Chris, you grew up in a couple of places. I don't understand why we have so many places that are still like that. Do you, Chris?
No, I've lived in New Jersey, in Minnesota, in Florida, in Alabama, Kentucky, New York City. And my favorite neighborhood, favorite place I think I've lived is Queens, New York. From the train to the apartment, only a couple blocks. You know, I'd pass grocery stores, coffee shops, fruit markets. I would hear 15 languages. It just, there's nothing to compare it to. Like most people do not have that kind of exposure to different cultures, different skin tones. But I feel like, honestly, exposure is one of the best remedies. It's not the only remedy, but it certainly you cannot be a horrible, hateful person if you know somebody and are friends with somebody who has more melanin than you, right?
I wish that were true, but it just seems like there are so many pockets of racism, even in those diverse places that you describe. I don't know. I mean, I certainly
that's true.
When I'm in a place like that you described, I'm just like, oh wow, this is so cool. I get exposed to different people, different ideals, different personalities, and life really for me has always been about learning. I've always joked that I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
It was not a tolerance paradise. 1 month before I moved to Queens, my neighborhood, someone murdered the imam of the local mosque. So, and it was 100% a hateful driven thing. Like it was outside the mosque on service, after services, clearly targeted. It's not, just because it's diverse doesn't mean it's perfect. You know, it's certainly not a tolerant community. I know that the more places I have lived and been exposed to different types of people with different types of backgrounds, different languages, different foods, the more I have been, the more familiarized I am, and the more I can connect with those folks, no matter where they are, on some human level. Maybe I'm wired that way, or maybe it's just the exposure. I don't know.
I think because I was kind of walking through what I've experienced as you said that, Chris, and I really think that you say what you say because when you were immersed in that kind of a very diverse environment, that's how you reacted to it. And it seems like the natural thing. And I was the same way, right? I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. And then when I went to college, which in itself is like extremely privileged that, hey, I went to college and was able to pick where I went. And I was able to go to college in the middle of a fairly large city, very diverse area. And I kind of reacted the exact same way. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like all these different people who have different lives, different experiences, different cultures, different norms. It's awesome. And I loved it. But people who are already like, I really hate everyone else who doesn't look like me for literally no reason, that I think at that point, like once you hit that, I think you're just too closed-minded for any of that to make a difference. And you're going to hate those people no matter what. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you change that, because I've seen the same thing where immersion doesn't. They just hate everyone who's around them.
So I know we had talked about this a while back in a group message that we have on Signal that Plums is not a part of, talking about this same thing. And it was like, I don't know how you fix it, because I'm seeing posts online in communities that I'm a part of in like white suburbia Ohio, where you've got high schoolers, you've got college kids so fucking proud of themselves. They've got the shit-eating grin on their face doing the George Floyd challenge, where one person lays on the ground, the other person kneels on their neck, and they get a photo of it, post it to social media, and are so proud of themselves for doing it. I'm like, how the fuck do you change that? Like that mentality. And it's like the only thing I can think of is you can't at this point rely on parents to raise their children the right way, because like you said, at certain points you become old enough, and then that immersion, you're just too turned off by it to like accept it for what it is, and for such a beautiful thing. So I think you have to rely on the school system to put kids or give kids that immersion in other cultures at a young age and show them this is a good thing, and then realize, then hope that is helps these young kids realize that hey, maybe these people are humans too, and are worthy of respect. And just, I don't know, I don't know how you can take something like the murder of George Floyd and just make light of it in that manner and be that, I don't know.
But
I was reading. Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I was reading to prepare for this social justice topic because I have to admit that I see with blinders on, obviously my privilege blinders. But as I was reading, I came across an article that discussed why it's different, Mitch. Why those lily white high school kids thinks it's so cute to do the George Floyd challenge, if you will. It's because this has been studies have shown, and Mark alluded to it, white people are assumed innocent till proven otherwise.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Brown and black people are assumed guilty right off the bat.
Yep.
100%. And just growing up in Frankfurt with a predominantly black university, I mean you could, so we would, in the olden days, you could be very irresponsible, and you could drive around and drink, and that was the thing to do. And not only was it the thing to do, but people did it when they were underage. And we can talk about all the bad things, but we would constantly drive through the campus area, and I never once got pulled over in the campus area. And after a certain time of afternoon or evening, there were always people of color pulled over on the roads that my friends and I were driving on while drinking, with a full cooler in the back seat or the trunk. Or I had a buddy that actually had a kegerator in the trunk with a hose through the back seat. Not once did we ever get pulled over. And yet, like clockwork, people that didn't look like us were pulled over every time you drove through town, through campus. And that was a long time ago, and I just don't think it's changed. I mean, we can talk about George. We have been. We can talk about Breonna Taylor. But we can pull a name off of a news site for 7 months ago, and 22 months ago, and 4 years ago, and 10 years ago, and we can go back to Rodney King in Los Angeles, and we can go way past Rodney King. So it's not gotten any better for anybody that doesn't look like us. And this COVID stuff is odd that some of these things have hit during it. And that's, you see a lot of the, I'll call this shade type racism, but there are people that are like, well, if we should be wearing masks, we should make all these protests illegal because they're not healthy. And those are from the people that think wearing a mask is against their civil liberties or their constitutional rights. And it's just amazing that the arguments that happen, and Chris talked about the social media things going on. Any one of us could jump on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, right now, and we could find a crazy white person losing their mind because of wearing a mask or a Black Lives Matters event, and almost always the defense is some weak defense about mental illness. I lost my mind. I didn't really mean that. Yet they're recorded saying the worst things that anybody could possibly say. Read the other day, community pool, predominantly black pool. A mother and child swimming. Mom comes over to say something to the child that's swimming laps in one of the lanes, and a white person loses their shit because these people don't belong in their pool, the community pool. If it's a public pool, everybody is part of the public, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I wanna go back a little bit and touch on something you had said just a minute ago, about how you can look back through the years and, obviously what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor are terrible things, but you can go back and pick a year, right? And you can find the exact same thing. And I've had conversations with people who they don't seem to understand how endemic the problem is. I've heard people say things like, well, the officers who murdered George Floyd, like, they were arrested and charged. So, like, they did it. Like, the protesters did it. So, like, why are they still protesting? And I'm like, that's such a myopic view to just be laser focused on this one issue. It's such a bigger problem than that. You have to really look at the entire scope of history of the country to realize that there's a much bigger problem at play here, and that saying that, oh yeah, the officers who murdered somebody are charged now, everything's better, is just a very nearsighted thing to do.
And that racism even starts to stand out in that discussion, John, in that occasionally in the protest, opportunistic criminal activities happen. And so...
Well, and
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other point that you had kind of brought to my mind is you were describing the people saying, well, if we're supposed to wear masks, then all these protests should be illegal, are often the same people who you scroll up 2 weeks in their Twitter feed, and they're, outside of some government building with like assault weapons, protesting the fact that they're supposed to wear masks. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I was thinking the exact same thing. The people that want to say, oh, you can't protest Black Lives Matter because of COVID, are the exact same people protesting the masks because of COVID.
Yeah, for sure. And that, so you'll have, I'll just call them racist, that will say, well, protesting is okay, but they're riots. Well, they're not riots. There are people that are opportunistic, and whether those opportunistic people are black or white, it doesn't really matter. And in some cases, in Minneapolis, it was a white police officer that started a massive riot event. But if you want to make that argument that all black people are bad because riots break out at these protests, then you also got to sign up for all police officers are bad because a handful of police officers are part of racism and police brutality. Nobody's going to make that second argument at all. Not a one. The first argument doesn't hold water, but if you believe that, if you believe the first, then you have to believe the second if you're going to be fair.
Yep. You can't just cherry pick it like that all the time, but you see people do that consistently, even subtly with just kind of the words they use, where the people standing with assault weapons, defending their right to liberty by not wanting to wear masks. Those are protesters, right? But then you see news articles or people on social media talk about how people protesting for the Black Lives Matter movement, well, those are rioters or even looters or even domestic terrorists. And I'm like, we're just going to make up words now to fit whatever narrative people want to say. And what's terrifying to me is just how delusional or how insulated in their own bubble people have to be that they see that and they think like, yeah, that's right. That's absolutely correct. Like me standing with an AR-15 outside of the governor's mansion, that was a protest and that was a just thing for me to do. But those people who are protesting because they don't want to just be murdered for no reason whatsoever, like, those are rioters. That's not okay. That needs to be stopped. And it kind of circles back to our original discussion. Like when you hit that point where you think that's okay, I don't know what you do to kind of bring those people back into some semblance of reality.
I continue to think that people that think like us have to vote people in office. We have to hire people for jobs. We have to hope that leadership in the companies that we work for and we work with, that we try to get them to hire qualified people and people of color and people of diverse backgrounds and those sorts of things to move the discussion forward. It's got to be less people like us and more people that don't look like us for us to really get to any substantive change. And I think there are pockets of change, but I think there's so many places where there are not pockets of change, and all four of us live in Kentucky is a red, conservative, racist state, and Ohio is a predominantly conservative state. That's even the city of Cincinnati has had lots of racial unrest for decades that's not been solved. And
I think, Mark, you made probably the most important point of the episode right there. Which is really that for anyone who's in this situation like we are, where, we ourselves are insulated from this, we're in privileged positions, we need to take advantage of that to figure out the ways that we can make a difference. Because I think a lot of people, and I've definitely been guilty of this myself too, right, is that you see really terrible things happen in the world, you see this injustice, and you retweet some articles about it and you're like, well, I've done my part, like, I don't know what else I can do. Like, there are things you can do. You just got to be aware of it and kind of focus on what you can do to make that change, as opposed to just being like the armchair, person for justice who's just, I'm going to yell at racists on Twitter. Like, that's not going to fucking do anything, right? You got to find ways that you can make a difference.
I agree, and I'll tell you that I've had some personal struggles with the unrest in Louisville and wanting to participate, and having a family health situation that doesn't allow me to really do that, take that chance, but felt guilty that I don't leave my house and drive to Louisville and participate in that. And so we have to find ways to participate in the ways we can, other than that retweeting or having that commentary or even recording a podcast. I would say, though, that four white dudes that recognize their privilege can make a difference incrementally in the communities in which we hang out and participate in. I know, I mean, I see Chris like out in public treat everybody fairly, and that's important. And so I just think we have to figure out inventive ways to do that.
And it's not that you don't, John. It's just that he doesn't see you in public.
Especially not now, right?
Especially not now.
Especially how many days? How many days, John?
Especially 146 days in the quarantine.
146 days. Oh my God.
So plus, pre-COVID, Mark had that big drive, so he couldn't go like hang out with me after work.
Go ahead, Chris. I know that we're coming up to your hard stop.
My hard stop. Yeah. I did want to say that you mentioned how this, even if this doesn't seem to be moving the needle, right? And I fully agree with you. This is sort of, I don't know if it feels interesting to have four guys talking craft beer and social justice, but the fact that I'm even now super aware of my privilege is the start of a change, right? I think the fact that we have this global pandemic, and I think history books will show that this will be the start of some sort of cultural change across the globe. The entire world was protesting what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota,
and Louisville.
And Louisville. I'm sorry, not to forget about Breonna Taylor. Louisville, Minneapolis. There were people all over the world protesting racial disparities in policing. It's not just the U.S., but we could lead out of this. We can lead our way out of this, but right now we're not a global leader, and we have to get back to being a global leader.
Yeah, and we gotta take Mo with us, momentum, and we have to figure out along the way. I'm optimistic like Chris is, but we have to figure out how to maintain the momentum. The protests are not sustainable for weeks and months. People have to live their lives and work their jobs and take care of their families. We have to figure out a way to get some momentum and keep that momentum. We have some opportunities here with the election coming up, but what we really need is those opportunities at other levels. The county judge executives, that was for you, Chris. The state representatives and senators across the country.
Your county sheriff is an electable position.
Yeah, the county sheriff. We need change in all of those places. We don't just need change at the top of the United States. We don't just need change in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives. We have to have change throughout, and we have to really hit all areas of the leadership infrastructure in order to make that change. I saw something the other day, and I threw it in the show notes, and I just grabbed it and threw it in email, and it was late at night, and I was reading something, and I don't know who it came from, but it said, imagination and empathy. Imagine yourself in their body. And just think about that. Think about all the things you see on TV and all the things you see on social media about people of color that are treated less than human, treated like they're guilty before they've gone to court. They get pulled out of a car and a whole family gets handcuffed and put on the ground and made a public display of. And it's just something that when I go back and so I read the article from Aaron, and it really hit home with me. And to your point, Chris, I've always thought I've been liberal. I've always thought I've been inclusive. But when I read Aaron's article about all the things that happened to him, and I just go back and go through the inventory of my life, how many things I got away with because I was a white guy. And I think that's important that I said a white guy, because I still think we have a societal issue with women, regardless of color and discrimination. But as a white guy, how many things that I got away with, and how many things, if you are a young black man or woman, middle-aged black man or woman, older black man or woman, and you have a nice car, or you drive through a nice neighborhood, or you go to some place that's mostly white, there's a huge perception that you're not supposed to be there. That just can't be our world. So, Chris,
go ahead. Point.
Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say the one thing I was going to add to that, Mark, is I really agree with your point that while we focus on the big picture politics, that it is important at the local level too, especially within some of our local communities, where now is sort of the prime time where some of those local leaders, some of those local officials could step up, and some of them are. And some of them are choosing to ignore it all and do things like fight against, mask ordinances and that sort of thing instead. So I just thought it was a really good point that while definitely having leadership who has their mind in the right place, and even better, is representative of minority groups, would be ideal, that we need to kind of focus at all levels as well. Leadership, state and local government, leadership roles within companies that we work for, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I know, Chris, you need to get out of here, so we'll close up and tell people where they can find us. But let me throw this out. I haven't shared this with any of the three of you. It's a waste for me to share it with John because he doesn't listen to podcasts, although he is the king of recording a podcast. But I ran across another podcast, and it's called The Tightrope, and it's hosted by Dr. Cornel West and Trisha Rose. And it's got some really compelling content. I would tell you to go out and grab it and listen to it. And one of the episodes I've already listened to was from back in late July, and they had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on, AOC, as we affectionately call her. And she, I'm a fan based on the ideology that we've talked about today. But to listen to her, and as she grew up in New York City with a ethnic background from Puerto Rico, and in an ethnic community, and in disparate religious, her family came from two different kinds of religion that really didn't have similarities, and how she found her way based on the community she lived in, the people she was around, her ethnic background, and her religious exposure. It was really compelling. Dr. West is kind of one of those really preeminent sort of scholars on a lot of the issues that we've talked about today in terms of Black lives and discrimination and things like that. So I just throw that out that anybody listening, I've found everyone I've listened to so far compelling, entertaining, and Dr. West has a ton of energy. It's really, really interesting stuff. So
I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So, Chris, where can people find you online?
Oh, well, it's funny you should ask, Mark. Besides the usual Tinder and Bumble, but you can find me on bluebirdsofcentralkentucky.com.
No shit. Is it live?
No shit. No.
Oh, it's not live.
By the time this podcast is live, I'm sure there'll be something there to find. And listen, for both listeners of this podcast, thank you for checking out the new website. Been happy with it. There's some words that I will take credit for. They're probably like pronouns, but those words are mine. The pronouns are mine. So I run a little bluebird habitat restoration program in Franklin County. And someone on the podcast is nice enough to help me with the website. So thanks, Mark.
Good deal. Mitch, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at drunktweets513. We've been a little less active lately. It's my best friend and I. We, pre-COVID, would get together and drink multiple nights a week. We're just down the road from each other. We're not far. So it would be, we'd crash at each other's place for an evening and we would drink or we'd go out. And when we're drunk, we think we say funny stuff. And then we post it on Twitter.
And then the next morning, it's not quite as funny, right?
Oh, it's even better the next morning.
All right, good deal. I do think
maybe not funny, but better in some ways.
I do think you should create an egg sandwich Instagram account, and just every night that there's a late night egg sandwich making, you should post the egg sandwiches of your friends.
I think I might be doing that here soon. I might hijack the drunk tweets one for that, because I only make those egg sandwiches when I'm drunk, so it fits.
All right, there you go. JFabHD, John, where can people find you?
It's just like parallel parking. He can only do it when he's drunk. Oh wait, that's me. Sorry. No. Oh, what a terrible joke. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing on the internet anymore. My main website is jfabhd.com. That has links to other things that may or may not be up. Everything in the world has made me like really anti-internet lately. So I've been kind of migrating all my stuff to the sort of like the indie web movement, which means I'm not going to share any of it here.
Because you're not going to give us your Mastodon identities, is what you're saying.
The Mastodon one, the blog, a couple other websites. Like I've moved a lot of stuff. Basically, I won't bore anyone. This could be like an entire other episode, but it's sort of like take back control. Self-host all your stuff. Don't put fucking trackers to garbage on it. Don't link it all around. Not all of it has to be tied to your government identity or whatever. So I don't know, a lot of that. I don't know what I'm doing. The whole pandemic thing. I've been home too long, man. I got way too much time on my hands.
That sounds like an episode.
JFabHD.com. That's exactly. JFabHD is where you can find me. How about you, Mark?
All right, and you're keeping. Are you going to keep blogging at Unusually Pink?
Not at the moment. No.
Okay.
No, I don't know what I'm doing with Unusually Pink. At the time, you cannot get to that site right now.
Okay. Then I will take it out of the show notes. I changed the name of it since it's no longer a podcast. I just called it a blog.
Yeah, the podcast is. I guess is this the first recording we've done since the podcast ended? The Unusually Pink podcast.
No, I think we talked about it on Comet Run.
Yes, you're right. Okay, good deal. Yeah. So where can people find you? Where you at?
Same sort of deal, John. Still working on that website. I got to work on Chris's website before I can work on mine. Just waiting on his words. And so craftbrewgeek.com will actually take you to Instagram, and I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I think I mentioned this, but not a lot of new content because I've just got this thing about people are dying and people are being discriminated against, and it seems counterintuitive for me to be posting too much about beer or art. I'm trying to get back on the horse, but we live in interesting times, and I'm just kind of extra sensitive to those things. But occasionally something pops up on one of those sites, usually beer or something along those lines. Hey, listen, Chris, we appreciate you joining us. We also appreciate
Thanks for the opportunity redemption.
Yeah, we appreciate you not fucking up the podcast.
Still time.
No, the podcast is over. We're closing out. And Mitch, we'll have you back soon so that we can make sure you stay ahead of Chris.
I don't need to be back soon to do that. It's okay.
That's true. That's true. We will say that Plums was really a pretty good podcast guest. So
he was. I listened to that on my last long drive down to southern Kentucky, and it was good. It went really well. He used the mute button when he should. I could tell there was no background noise from him like other people may have done in the past. But he was really good. He was energetic. He was excited to be there.
He was excited to be there. That was, I will tell you, it was rewarding for me. I know John and I haven't talked about this, but what I enjoyed about that episode was it was such a big deal for him to join us on that episode, and he was truly happy and overjoyed about it. And Plums is a good kid, good young man, and that really made me happy that it was such a big deal for him and went so well.
Can I make a request?
Yeah, it was really rewarding, but like we're still not letting him in that signal chat.
We're still not letting him in the signal chat.
Yeah, for sure not. Can I make a request though?
Yep.
I noticed he was silent for the first 15 to 20-ish minutes of the podcast when you do your usual "what beers are we drinking?" Once he's old enough and he can join in that conversation, I'd like to be there for it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have you on with Plums. Maybe we should do one on his 21st birthday.
I'd be game.
I can see that. For that. Yeah. That sounds right.
It actually sounds like a train wreck.
Well, it will totally be a train wreck. It won't be a podcast. It'll be disaster. But we have 4 decades on this podcast right now.
We do.
20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's pretty cool.
It is, and honestly, that's how John and I came about this, is that you don't have to be of the same generation and same backgrounds to have things in common and have similar ideologies and want to treat people the way they want to be treated. And I appreciate you guys joining John and I for this discussion. I think it's important for privileged white men like us to recognize the issues and to carry what we can forward in our own individual ways. And that's what our podcast is about.
Let's say, is there a phrase that you would use to describe like people of different ages, slightly different backgrounds that really find they line up pretty similar on a lot of topics?
I think it's the same shade of difference.
Oh, I like that. You should start something with that.
We should.
It should be like a podcast.
We should maybe buy that name. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Peace out, boys.